Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us. The COVID-19 pandemic is still ravaging various jurisdictions. Please, if you haven't left your home, wear a face mask. Ensure that it's covering the hotspots, the mouth, and also your nostrils. And also, please, go for vaccinations. It's imperative that you get vaccinated so that we can ensure a full reopening of the economy and our educational institutions as of January of 2022. Even though that doesn't happen, the government is moving forward with those plans, and the onus of protecting individuals of this society has been put on the citizens themselves. So please, let's do the needful in that regard. And the next conversation is largely being brought to you by the Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute, and that is CIATINI. It's flanked by Grace Namugambe, the program officer. She's here to talk about the youth participation in domestic resource mobilization. How can we enhance youth participation in domestic resource mobilization? A very good morning, Grace Namugambe. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
How is CIATINI this beautiful Thursday morning? What is CIATINI, by the way? Our viewers would like to know.
So CIATINI is the Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute, like
what do you
already mentioned. We do quite a lot of work around trade and tax, basically looking to eat that the trade and tax policies that we have in place are fair and responsive to the needs of East African countries. All right.
The tax and trade policies that we have are responsive to the needs of citizens within Africa. And right now you want to talk about enhancing youth participation and domestic resource mobilization. What is domestic resource mobilization?
So domestic revenue mobilization is basically looking at how governments are able to source revenue or resources domestically to ensure that we can finance our economy, to finance our development priorities and so on and so forth. Yes. So it's, you look at issues to do with taxation, you look at debt, among others.
The debt in Uganda is around 65 trillion Uganda shillings, and if you look at other issues to do with tax, we do have a 44 trillion shilling budget, but then out of that, 21 trillion shillings is coming from the taxes. That's what government is saying. And many people are saying, instead of taxing people to smithereens, look at other alternative sources of actually accruing domestic resources. How best can they do that?
I think one first is to recognize that tax is the most sustainable source of revenue, because then you have your own revenue that you can that you have control over in terms of how you utilize it and front your priorities, unlike debt and grants and the likes that have conditionalities attached to them. And while it is good and ideal for government to look out for other alternative sources of revenue, there is need for us to look into our own population to see to it that we are able to collect revenue. That, and in this sense, you'll have a population where everyone is contributing a little bit, unlike what is happening now. Because right now what we see is that you have quite a number of people in the formal sector contributing the biggest chunk when it comes to revenue.
75%. And these are individuals who never received any stimulus package. So how are you taxing people you never helped actually come out of the pandemic? It's more like milking a cow minus giving it grass.
Yes. Yeah, and for us now it's to also see to it that this is only possible if everyone across the board appreciates the need to pay taxes. They appreciate that government needs this revenue to provide the much needed services. And I think that's the point when I get into the youth as a special group, because we know that government has not really paid a lot of attention to them, despite the fact that they have a lot of potential.
2%.
In terms of, and I'm looking at it not just in terms of them paying taxes, but them contributing to the process in terms of shaping policies around domestic revenue.
Now the viewer who is watching right now is actually having a question within their mind. They're like, okay, the youth, okay, these are the most youthful people within Uganda. We actually make the biggest chunk of this population. But 20 to 24 years, the youth are not employed. How will they contribute to the tax domestic resource mobilization? And we also do know that those who are between the ages of 25 years and above, 90% are either underemployed or not employed at all.
I think one is to recognize that everyone regardless of how much you think you earn, you're actually contributing to the revenue basket, to the tax
as long as you're
basket.
buying sugar at some point.
You're buying sugar, you're buying water, so you are contributing. And as a youth, you need to see to it that the way the money is being used is addressing some of the challenges that you have.
So your argument here is that if we increase the purchasing power of these young people, we increase the domestic resource mobilization pocket of the government in terms of taxes?
Partly that, if I'm to look at the entrepreneurs,
Okay.
but we have youth engaging in different activities.
All right.
We maybe just to take you back a bit, that we
Please
have the
do.
4 R's of taxation.
All right.
When it comes to tax, you're looking at it as a source of revenue for government to provide the much needed services. And then we have redistribution in terms of how the money is being distributed by government. And that is the part now where you'd also look at the youth, that is it being redistributed to sectors that are much needed for their growth, to support them, to enhance their livelihoods. You then look at things like education, you look at health, you look at agriculture, industry. Is government investing enough in those to ensure that that we have youth coming out of schools and getting employment, to see to it that they are able to access health care, to see to it that within the agriculture sector, government is investing enough to have the youth add value to their product.
I see.
Yes, so it's basically that. And then there is the issue of repricing, where basically government is imposing taxes to limit the consumption of goods that are deemed
Grace Namugambe.
socially
So
desirable,
literally you're telling us...
undesirable.
You're
Just let me just get through with this.
Okay.
Those that are deemed socially undesirable, or allow consumption of goods that ideally you need to get. For instance, you need sanitary towels for girls in school, you need books, materials for kids to get through education. And then we have the last one, which looks at representation, that if I have paid my taxes, then I have to influence in terms of how the money is being used, and it should be used to address my needs as a youth.
And that was going to be my next question, that none of those issues that you just mentioned are being used with these taxes. This money is not going a long way in alleviating any of those challenges. 20 trillion shillings has been lost in corruption over the last 10 years. These taxes are not being used for the right purpose.
And that is why we now see that there is that link between domestic revenue mobilization and the youth, garnering to have the youth engage in these processes, to see to it that the money that they are paying is being used to meet their needs. They need to follow up with the government officials.
What a complex conversation.
Processes,
indeed,
to see that the revenue is working for their needs.
A complex conversation indeed with Grace Namugambe, Program Officer at the Southern and Eastern Africa, that is Trade Information and Negotiations Institute. We are talking about enhancing youth participation in actually domestic resource mobilization. We're going to take a breather and return shortly with this same conversation. She is actually breaking down what it really means. We'll be right back. All right, I'm still having the program manager for the Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute, Siatini, and that is Grace Namugambe. We're talking about enhancing youth participation in domestic resource mobilization. We're talking about the issue of taxes and how we can tap into the youth who can actually add on to the resource bracket right here in Uganda. But then largely 80% of the youth live in rural areas. Those between the ages of 20 to 24 are unemployed, and those who are above the age of 25 are either, 90% of those above 25 are either unemployed or do not have any kind of an employment. So how can we expect taxes from a group of people who are not largely within the job market, who are not largely having enough purchasing power to actually contribute to the domestic tax mobilization resource envelope of this country? Grace Namugambe is going to help us shine a light on how best the youth can be helped be involved in this process. Grace Namugambe, how can this be done in a situation whereby the door has been locked? Can the youth just bombard and kick down the door and say, we want to participate?
Okay, so like I had alluded to earlier when I was talking about the 4 R's, that you as a taxpayer, you have a right to demand for accountability from the duty bearers in terms of how the revenue is being utilized. And there are spaces at the local government level, especially during the budget formulation process, where the youth can front their budget priorities in terms of what they would want to see being addressed within their localities. And that is something that people can tap into. So, and the idea is that we have this whole cycle of revenue mobilization, that the revenue is collected, it is allocated, it is utilized. And that cycle matters in terms of ensuring that the youth are able to have their potential enhanced so that they too can pay their taxes and demand for accountability. And what I mean by this is that how does government invest in sectors that are key for the growth of the youth?
All right.
Investing in education, like I said before, investing in industrialization to see to it that we are having more goods produced, we have jobs employed, and seeing those forward and backward linkages within that. In terms of agriculture, where many people are, seeing that there is mechanization of agriculture and that the youth are able to have increased sources of income so that they're paying their taxes and they're demanding for accountability.
Of course, we cannot talk about developing agriculture without access to land. The young people within this country have that major challenge of access to land to till. Majority of the youth are actually women who are engaged within the agricultural sector, many of whom do not have access to land. So such issues don't go a long way in actually dampening their resolve to add to the tax resource envelope of this nation.
And I think those are also conversations that we've been having as civil society in terms of ensuring that all people have access to land, that they have access to resources that enhance their growth. So while we are working towards ensuring that the resources are availed to see to it that there is growth among the youth, those are some of the issues that also feed into the conversation. It's a whole process.
In a nutshell, Grace Namugambe, if we do not invest in the young people, we shall not increase our domestic resource envelope. Yes or no?
I would agree to that because they are the biggest part of the population.
I hear you.
And their voices need to be heard and their needs need to be responded to see to it that we are widening the tax base and that we are having more fair policies in place that are responsive to the needs of the citizen.
All right, it makes more sense. That is Grace Namugambe, Program Officer, Southern and East and Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute. Thank you very much for coming through. This is a very important conversation. But then implementation of how we need to be doing this or expediting it is the $64,000 question. How do we need to be involving the youth at the national level, not only at the local level? Thank you very much.
They have spaces at the national level.
All right. While you are still watching Morning at NTV, Stephen Mbide is on the line. He's going to be talking to a group of councillors within Wakiso District, and it's their budget conference. Very good morning, Stephen. What's the latest coming in from Wakiso?
Thank you so much.